I went out to make a call and overheard my mom and aunt whisper, "She's a purse for us." That's when I realized I wasn't their daughter. I was their paycheck. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. It was a quiet Sunday evening. My mom, Ruth, had made her usual pot roast, and my Aunt Clara had come over to help, which usually meant drinking wine and gossiping while I cleaned up. I'd just finished washing the dishes and stepped outside to make a quick call to my best friend, Lil. I wanted to vent about how tired I was, how I felt like I was constantly giving but never receiving. As I stepped onto the porch, the night air was cool, calm, almost peaceful. Then I heard their voices through the open kitchen window. "Don't worry," my Aunt Clara said, her voice sharp and amused. "She'll pay for it. She always does." My mom laughed. "Oh, Nora? Of course. She's basically our purse now. She makes good money, no husband, no kids. What else is she gonna do with it?" They both laughed again. It wasn't the kind of laugh you hear between people who love someone. It was the kind of laugh that comes from taking advantage and enjoying it. My stomach dropped. For a second, I thought maybe I'd heard it wrong. Maybe they were joking. But then Clara added, "We should get her to cover the down payment before she starts asking questions." That was it. I froze there on the porch, my phone still in my hand, my call screen open but silent. My heart pounded like it was trying to escape my chest. I'd spent years believing that everything I did for them, paying bills, covering emergencies, helping with my cousin's tuition, was out of love, out of duty. But now I saw it for what it was. I was a wallet that walked and talked. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood there, letting the words burn into me. My own mother, the woman who raised me, was plotting how to use me again. I stepped back quietly, careful not to make any noise. I didn't want them to know I'd heard. When I walked back inside, they were sitting at the table, smiling like nothing had happened. My mom looked up at me and said, "We were just talking about how grateful we are for you, honey." I forced a smile. "That's nice, Mom." But inside, I was already gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling of my old childhood room, every shadow feeling like a lie. The house I'd helped them keep wasn't home anymore. It was just a place built on guilt and manipulation. I opened my laptop and started looking for apartments. I didn't know where I was going or what I'd do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done being their purse. By sunrise, I had a plan. I was leaving. And this time, I wouldn't look back. I sat in my new apartment, the silence almost too heavy to bear. For the first time in my life, there were no voices asking for money, no guilt trips, no fake gratitude. Just quiet. That quiet made the memories come back harder than I expected. All my life, I thought I was doing the right thing, being the good daughter. When my mom lost her job, I stepped in without thinking. I paid her rent, her utilities, even her credit card bills. She'd sigh and say, "You're such a blessing, Nora. Family comes first." Those words used to warm me. Now they felt like chains. I remembered how it started small. She'd ask me to cover a bill, just this once, then another, then another. I never questioned it. I thought that's what love was, helping without expecting anything back. When my cousin Mara wanted to go to college and didn't get enough financial aid, my mom said, "She's your cousin. You have a good job. You can help." And I did. I paid for 2 years of Mara's tuition while juggling my own student loans. Every time I tried to say no, my mom would look hurt, like I'd betrayed her. "After everything I've done for you," she'd whisper, as if she were the victim. Then Clara would call, saying, "Your mom's been crying all day, honey. You know how much she depends on you." That word, depends, used to make me proud. Now I saw it for what it was, control. There were moments when I sensed something wasn't right. Like when I overheard my mom telling a neighbor that she barely gets by because she has to take care of her daughter. I worked 2 jobs back then, sending her money every month. She made it sound like she was the one supporting me, but I brushed it off. I told myself she didn't mean it. Then there were the family gathering. My mom always painted me as the responsible one, but there was bitterness behind it. "Not everyone gets to chase their dreams like Nora," she'd say, her smile tight. "Some of us had to raise kids instead of running off to college." Everyone would nod sympathetically at her. I never corrected her. I just smiled and kept paying for dinner. As I sat in my empty apartment, I started seeing every moment clearly, the favors, the guilt, the twisted praise. I realized I'd been trained to feel proud of being used. My kindness had been turned into a job, one I never applied for. My therapist once told me, "Love without respect becomes debt." Back then, I didn't understand. Now I did. My love for my mother had been turned into something she could spend. I looked around the room, bare walls, a single chair, a small bed, and felt something new, relief. For once, no one expected anything from me. No one was waiting for me to open my wallet or apologize for wanting to live my own life. I wasn't the perfect daughter anymore. I was just Nora, and that was finally enough. The morning light crept through the curtains as I packed the last of my things into 2 old suitcases. I didn't bother leaving a note. There was nothing left to explain. The air in that house had become heavy, full of secrets and greed. I slipped my keys onto the kitchen counter and walked out quietly, careful not to wake anyone. The road was empty when I drove away. My chest felt tight, like I'd been holding my breath for years without realizing it. I didn't look back. The house disappeared in the rearview mirror, and with it, the person I had been inside those walls. By noon, I found a small apartment on the other side of town, a modest 1-bedroom with peeling paint and a creaky floor. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I sat on the floor beside a single box and let out a long breath. The silence was strange, but it didn't scare me. It felt honest. When I turned my phone back on, there were already missed calls. Then came the messages. My mother's name flashed across the screen again and again. How could you do this to us? After everything I've done for you. You're selfish, Nora. Family doesn't abandon family. A few minutes later, Aunt Clara joined in. You've lost your mind. Ruth is heartbroken. You owe her at least an explanation. I stared at the screen until the words blurred together. None of them asked if I was okay. None said they loved me. They just wanted control again. I blocked their numbers one by one. My hands trembled, but when the final one disappeared, I felt lighter. The next week, I started therapy. It was something I'd thought about for years, but never allowed myself to do. My therapist, Dr. Ellis, was calm and patient, never judging, never rushing me. I told her everything, how I'd been paying for my mother's debts, how guilt had become my daily routine. She listened quietly before saying, "That's not love, Nora. That's survival built on manipulation." Her words hit deeper than I expected. I realized I'd spent my whole life believing I was doing good, when I'd really been keeping everyone else comfortable at the cost of myself. For years, I'd thought I was strong for carrying it all. Now, I saw that strength wasn't about holding pain, it was about letting go. Each session chipped away at the fear that had kept me loyal to people who saw me as a resource. I started to understand that leaving wasn't betrayal. Staying would have been. One night, I opened my window and let the cool air fill the room. It smelled faintly of rain and freedom. For the first time, I could breathe without guilt pressing against my chest. The weight of expectation was gone. I didn't have everything figured out. I still woke up sometimes expecting a text, a demand, a cry for help. But then I'd remember that quiet morning when I walked out without a word, and how it felt like the first real step toward being alive. It had been a few weeks since I'd blocked their numbers when Ruth and Clara showed up at my office. I was on my lunch break, sitting outside with a sandwich, when their familiar voices froze me in place. My mother stood a few feet away, clutching a paper bag of pastries, her eyes red like she'd been crying. Clara hovered behind her, wearing that same forced smile she always used when she wanted something. "Nora," my mother said softly, stepping closer. "We just wanted to see you. We've been so worried." For a second, I couldn't move. Seeing her there made every wall I'd built start to shake. She looked smaller somehow, older, like guilt had carved lines into her face. Clara chimed in. "Your mom hasn't slept. We both just want peace. We miss you." I didn't trust myself to speak, so I nodded and let them sit beside me. They handed me a pastry, still warm. "Your favorite," my mom said, her voice trembling. "I know things got twisted, but we're family, sweetheart. We can fix this." Her words hit a familiar spot, the one that always made me doubt myself. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe they really did care. I'd been alone for weeks. Maybe I was just tired of fighting. We sat there for half an hour. They told me how hard things had been since I left, how empty the house felt. Clara dabbed her eyes dramatically and said, "You've always been our heart, Nora. We just want things to be good again." When I went back inside, part of me felt lighter. Maybe this was the start of healing. Maybe they'd finally seen how much they'd hurt me. A few days later, I got a text from my cousin Mar. She said she wanted to meet for coffee. I agreed. I was trying to believe things could change. When I arrived, she was already there, smiling nervously. We talked about small things, work, the weather, nothing deep. But as she went to the counter to grab napkins, she didn't notice her phone light up beside her. A new message appeared on her screen. "Aunt Ruth said she's coming around again. Just keep being nice till the loan clears." I stared at the words until my stomach twisted. The room seemed to tilt. Every apology, every tear, every hug, it was all another performance. They hadn't come to make peace. They'd come to finish taking what they started. When Mara came back, I forced a smile, pretending I hadn't seen a thing. We finished the coffee, chatting like nothing was wrong. But inside, something hard and cold settled in me. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt this quiet certainty spreading through me like steel. They would never stop. Not until I made them. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the small pile of bills I still had with their names on them. For the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt control returning, Slow, deliberate, unstoppable. If they wanted to play games, I was finally ready to play back. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by piles of papers. Every drawer, every old box, every folder I owned was open. Years of receipts, bank statements, and printed emails covered the table like pieces of a puzzle I'd never bothered to put together. My hands trembled, but not from fear this time. I wanted to see the truth in full light, no matter how ugly it was. I started from the beginning. Transfers to my mother's account, payments labeled as family support, checks to my aunt. Every dollar told a story I hadn't noticed before. I scrolled through old texts, reading her messages that once sounded like love, but now looked like command. Can you cover this bill till next month? You know how tight things are. Don't tell Clara, she'll feel bad. Family helps family, sweetheart. Each message chipped away at the picture of the woman I thought I knew. I found old voice recordings too, little snippets I'd saved by accident when my phone was glitching. I played one. It was my mother talking to Clara. She'll never say no. That's her problem. She wants to be needed. They both laughed. My chest tightened, but I kept listening. I needed to hear every word. When I checked my credit records online, something odd caught my eye. A loan from 5 years ago that I didn't remember taking. I opened the file and felt the room tilt. My name was there, my signature too, but it wasn't mine. The handwriting looked close, almost practiced. I felt a rush of nausea. She hadn't just used me emotionally, she'd crossed into something criminal. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, holding the paper under a lamp, my breath shallow. The betrayal had layers I'd never imagined. I wasn't just a purse. I was an identity to borrow, a credit line to drain. By morning, I had an appointment with a lawyer. His name was Mr. Dalton, a quiet man with sharp eyes and a calm voice. He read through the documents, flipping each page carefully. When he finally looked up, his tone was gentle but firm. Nora, this isn't a mistake. It's fraud. And you have proof. I swallowed hard. Can I do anything about it? He nodded. You can protect yourself. You can file a claim, freeze the accounts, even press charges if you choose. But you'll need to stay calm and document everything. Emotion gives them power. Evidence takes it back. I walked out of that office feeling different. The sadness that had followed me for months began to fade, replaced by something colder and sharper. It wasn't rage, it was focus. At home, I spread the documents across my table again, but this time, I wasn't trembling. I took photos, labeled folders, created a timeline. Every lie had a date, every betrayal had a record. I looked at my mother's signature beside mine and felt my jaw tighten. If they see me as a purse, I whispered, then it's time they see what happens when the purse snaps shut. 2 weeks later, I stood outside my mother's front door, holding a basket of muffins and a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The smell of the house hit me as soon as the door opened, cinnamon and old memories. Ruth's expression froze for a second before melting into surprise. Nora? Oh, honey. She wrapped me in a hug so tight it almost felt real. Aunt Clara appeared behind her, wiping her hands on a towel. Well, look who finally remembered her family, she said with a forced laugh. I smiled back, playing my part. I just wanted to stop by. Thought we could have dinner together, like old times. The tension dissolved instantly. Ruth started bustling around the kitchen, chattering about recipes and plans for the weekend. Clara poured wine and told me how they'd both missed me. Every word sounded practiced, but I nodded, pretending to believe it. As they talked, I placed my purse on the counter, making sure my phone camera faced them. The recording app blinked quietly. I'd promised myself this visit wasn't about emotion. It was business. Ruth sat beside me at the table, holding my hand. You know, sweetheart, things have been hard since you left. The bills piled up, the house repairs, she sighed dramatically. If we could just hang on a little longer, that loan should clear. We'll be fine after that. Clara leaned in. Yeah, once the papers are processed, we'll finally catch a break. It's almost done. We just need your name to stay on file a bit longer. I took a sip of wine to hide my reaction. Inside, my pulse thudded, but I kept my smile soft. Of course, I said gently. I don't mind helping. You know I always try to. Their faces lit up. They thought I was theirs again, obedient, blind, easy. They didn't notice the red light blinking from my phone. Dinner went on like nothing had ever happened. Ruth bragged about a new furniture set she planned to buy once the loan money arrived. Clara joked about vacations. They were careless, confident, exactly how I needed them to be. When the plates were cleared, I offered to help with the dishes. Ruth laughed, waving me off. You've done enough, sweetheart. Just sit and relax. We'll take care of things now. I smiled, knowing those words would soon turn against her. That night, I walked out with my heart steady and my phone full of evidence. Every word, every name, every plan, they'd all been recorded. The next morning, I sent the files to Mr. Dalton, my lawyer. He called within the hour. Nora, he said, voice calm but firm, this is exactly what we needed. That clause in the loan, the one your mother forged, it ties them both to liability. They've trapped themselves. I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the quiet street. The game they'd started was almost over. For years, they'd pulled the strings, convinced I'd never cut them. But this time, I wasn't their purse. I was the one closing it. The restaurant was quiet, tucked away from the busy main street. I'd chosen it on purpose, neutral ground, private enough for what needed to happen. The table was already set when Ruth and Clara walked in, their laughter echoing as if nothing bad had ever existed between us. Ruth wore her favorite pearl earring, and Clara carried a bouquet of flowers, the kind of empty gesture she thought could erase anything. "Look at you," Ruth said, hugging me with both arms. "Our girl looks happy again." I smiled faintly. "I am. Sit down, please. I wanted us to have a nice dinner. There's something I've been meaning to share." They sat, trading glances like they were already planning what favor to ask. The waiter took our orders, and when he left, I reached into my bag. A folder landed on the table with a soft thud. "What's that?" Clara asked, still smiling. "Just some things I thought we should look at together," I said, sliding the papers toward them. Bank statements, the loan documents, and a few recordings. Ruth's hand froze halfway to her glass. "Recordings?" I met her eyes. "You called me your purse. Let's talk about that." For a moment, the table went silent. Clara blinked fast, her mouth twitching into a nervous smile. "Honey, that's ridiculous. You must have misheard." I turned my phone face up. The screen glowed, and my mother's voice filled the air, cold and clear. "She's a purse for us." The color drained from Ruth's face. She reached out to grab the phone, but I pulled it back slowly. "Don't. There's more." I placed another sheet in front of her, the loan agreement with her forged signature beside mine. Ruth's lips parted, no words coming out. Clara leaned forward, her tone soft, almost pleading. "Nora, we didn't mean it like that. We were stressed. Your mom was under pressure." I cut her off quietly. "Save it. You didn't just take advantage of me. You committed fraud in my name. I could have lost everything." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "You wouldn't do that to your own mother. You wouldn't ruin us over a misunderstanding." Her voice trembled, the guilt act she'd used my entire life. But it didn't work anymore. I sat back, calm, steady, almost detached. "You already ruined it. I'm just cleaning up what's left." Clara tried again, voice firmer this time. "You'll regret this. We're family." I met her stare, unblinking. "Family doesn't lie. Family doesn't steal. What you are to me now is evidence." Ruth's hands shook as she gathered the papers, flipping through them as if denial could rewrite the truth printed in black ink. "You wouldn't go to the police. You can't." "I already did," I said evenly. "Everything's in motion. Tonight was just a courtesy." They both stared at me, the confidence draining out of them like air from a punctured balloon. Ruth's lips trembled. "Nora, please. We can fix this." I stood up slowly, placing my napkin on the table. "No, you can't. This isn't something you can talk your way out of." Then I walked away, leaving them sitting there, surrounded by the pieces of the life they'd built on lie. The following week, I sat across from Mr. Dalton in his office as he slid a final stack of papers toward me. My signature was the last thing needed. The fraud claim was official. He assured me the evidence was airtight, the forged loan, the recordings, the bank trail linking every payment to my mother and aunt. When I put my pen down, something inside me loosened. There was no going back. By the end of the month, everything began to unravel. My mother's accounts were frozen. Her credit rating collapsed overnight. The house she'd bragged about was now tangled in debt she couldn't hide. Aunt Clara's small catering business, the one she'd proudly said she built from the ground up, turned out to be half funded by the money that had gone missing from my accounts. Once the investigation started, her business loans were pulled. Within 2 weeks, it shut down completely. The phone calls started again, not to me this time, but between them. I didn't answer when unknown numbers appeared on my screen, but Mr. Dalton told me enough. They were panicking, each blaming the other. Clara claimed Ruth had planned everything. Ruth insisted Clara had convinced her. Their lawyer begged for leniency, promising repayment, apologies, anything to avoid charges. But the documents spoke louder than their words. The rest of the family got wind of it quickly. My cousin stopped calling. My uncle, who'd always sided with my mother, sent one short text. "I can't believe you did this to her." I didn't reply. None of them knew what it was like to grow up being drained dry under the name of love. They saw a mother and daughter fighting over money. They didn't see years of manipulation disguised as care. When the official notice came that the case was moving forward, I went for a walk instead of celebrating. The air outside was crisp, the trees almost bare. I passed a park where children were laughing, parents sitting nearby, easy and unguarded. It stung more than I expected. I'd spent so long wanting that kind of connection, believing I had it, even when it was just an illusion. At home, I packed away the old photographs. The smiling faces, birthday parties, holidays, all moments that looked warm on the surface. But now every picture felt staged. I kept one, though, a photo of me as a kid, standing between my mother and Clara, both with their hands on my shoulders. I tucked it into a drawer, not out of affection, but as proof of what I'd survived. Days turned into weeks, and the noise around the case faded into background hums of paperwork and court schedule. I no longer flinched when the phone rang. I didn't feel powerful or proud, just tired. My mother's world was collapsing, but I wasn't celebrating it. Watching her fall wasn't victory. It was confirmation that what we'd had was never real. That realization hurt the most. I hadn't just lost a family. I'd learned they'd never truly existed. What I'd loved was a story I'd written in my own head, hoping one day they'd live up to it. Now, I was learning how to live without that story at all. The city I moved to was smaller, quieter, the kind of place where no one knew my name. The house I bought sat at the end of a narrow street lined with old. It wasn't big, 2 bedrooms, a faded porch, and a tiny backyard, but when I unlocked the door for the first time, it felt like freedom. The room smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. I filled the space slowly, one piece at a time. A thrifted couch, mismatched dishes, a secondhand lamp that flickered when I turned it on. Each item felt earned, like it belonged only to me. The first night I cooked in my own kitchen, I made something simple, scrambled eggs and toast. But the sound of the pan, the smell of butter, the quiet hum of the fridge felt like music. I sat by the window, eating slowly, realizing I didn't owe a single bite to anyone. A few weeks later, I went to the local shelter just to look. A small brown dog pressed her nose through the bars of a kennel, eyes wide and uncertain. I knelt down, and she wagged her tail once, cautious but hopeful. I named her Maple and took her home that same day. She followed me from room to room, her paws tapping softly against the wood floors. For the first time, the house didn't feel empty. Therapy became my weekly anchor. Dr. Ellis didn't talk much. She let me fill the space with what I needed to say. There were days I cried without knowing why, and others where we just sat in silence, the kind that heals instead of hurts. Slowly, I began to see the difference between kindness and submission, love and obligation. The version of me who had lived for other people's approval started to fade. I began writing small lists each morning, nothing grand, just reminders. Take a walk, make lunch, call Lily, water the plants. Ordinary things that added up to something that looked like peace. I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to live anymore. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a familiar number. Mr. Dalton's calm voice came through the line. "It's over," he said. "The settlement's finalized. You've won." I sat down on the porch steps, Maple curling beside me. The breeze carried the scent of pine and rain. Winning didn't feel like triumph, it felt like release. I thanked him, hung up, and let the silence stretch around me. When the settlement money arrived, I didn't think of revenge or comfort. I thought of how many women must have stood where I once stood, trapped, confused, believing love meant debt. I donated part of it to a women's support fund in the city, requesting it remain anonymous. That evening, I cooked again, this time for 2. Maple watched every move, tail thumping against the floor. The house glowed in the fading light, soft and warm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's daughter, savior, or victim. I was simply Nora, whole, quiet, and free in the life I built with my own hand. The sun had just slipped behind the hills when I heard the knock. Maple lifted her head from the couch, ears twitching, a low growl rumbling in her throat. No one ever came by without calling first. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door slowly. Clara stood on the porch, her coat too thin for the chill, her face drawn and pale. The years had carved themselves into her features. The confident woman I remembered was gone. What stood before me was smaller, almost hollow. She tried to smile, but it came out shaky. "Hi, Nora." I didn't speak. She glanced past me into the house, her eyes catching on the warm light and the quiet order of the space. "You've done well for yourself," she said softly. "It's nice. What do you need, Clara?" My voice came out calm, steady. She hesitated, clutching her purse like it might disappear. "I wouldn't be here if it weren't serious. Your mom's not doing great. Everything's gone, Nora, the house, the savings. We just need a little help to get back on our feet." Her tone cracked halfway through the sentence. "Family takes care of family, right?" The old words hit me like a faint echo. Once they would have made me fold, made me reach for my wallet before I even thought about it. Now they only reminded me of the years I'd spent mistaking guilt for love. I stepped onto the porch, the cool air brushing my skin. "You're right," I said quietly. "Family does take care of family." She looked up quickly, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Exactly," she said, nodding eagerly. "We knew you'd understand." I met her gaze, unflinching. "And I finally learned to take care of myself." Her smile faltered. The words hung between us, sharp and final. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. The silence stretched until even the wind seemed to pause. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it more than she could know. But you and Ruth made your choices. So did I. Clara's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I saw a flash of regret in her eyes. Maybe it was real. Maybe it wasn't. She gave a small nod, murmured something that sounded like, "I understand," and turned away. Her footsteps faded down the gravel path until there was only the sound of crickets again. I closed the door slowly, locking it out of habit. Maple padded over and rested her head on my leg, sensing the quiet shift in the air. I ran my hand over her fur and took a long breath. The house felt still, but not empty. I walked to the window, watching the last traces of daylight slip away. There was no triumph in me, no satisfaction, only a steady calm. I had finally stopped trying to fix what was never mine to repair. Sometimes, walking away isn't revenge, it's freedom disguised as silence. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away for good, or should I have given them another chance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories.